exposing the propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. With you, as always, this is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. Thanks for listening tonight. Glad to be back on the air after a short hiatus. Past week has kept me very busy and lots of things have transpired. But in the meanwhile, let's just go ahead and jump into the topics that we're going to cover tonight. The main topic that we're discussing is how Chris Dorner, is not a hero. Now, you would think that would go without saying. However, if you were watching CNN this past week and watching this made-for-television movie with socialist manifestos and attacks and sniper fire and innocent people being killed, you might have thought this guy was a Born Identity type anti-hero that everybody was rooting for. We'll get to that later, and we'll get into it later, but first, let's take on some of the topics that everybody's talking about today, shall we? First of all, one of the biggest stories of the day, and certainly one that caught my attention, was the apparent meteor explosion over Russia today, in which it actually became a meteorite. And we'll go over and answer just a few questions you might be having in relation to the Russian meteor. First of all, if you're curious about these and other things, let's hit the basics. First of all, as you hopefully know by now, and if you don't, welcome to today's news stories. A meteor exploded in the skies over Russia today, causing a shockwave that blew out windows, injuring hundreds of people, and sending fragments falling to the ground. Some of you may not know, so let's cover these questions. What's the difference between a meteor and a meteorite? Well, the current definition as it stands now is that meteors are pieces of space rock, usually from larger comets or asteroids, which enter the Earth's atmosphere. Typically, they're burned up by the heat of the atmosphere, but those that survive and strike the Earth are called meteorites. They often hit the ground at tremendous speeds, up to 18,600 miles per hour, according to the European Space Agency. How common are meteorite strikes, you may ask? Well, according to the experts at NASA and the European Space Agency, small strikes happen about 5 to 10 times a year. Large impacts, like the one today in Russia, are rare, but still occur about every 5 years. Most of them happen in uninhabited areas where they don't cause injuries to people. Is there a link to the asteroid field taking... I'm sorry. Phone's going off in the background. I lost my presence here. Normally, we don't have the phone lines in the studio open at this hour, so I apologize. At any rate, is there any link to the asteroid flyby taking place later today? Which actually has taken place by the time of the airtime, but not at the time I was doing show prep. Anyway, the short answer to that is no. It's just a cosmic coincidence. Again, this is according to the European Space Agency. When was the last comparable meteor strike? In 2008, astronomers spotted a meteor headed towards Earth about 20 hours before it entered the atmosphere. It exploded over a vast area over the African nation of Sudan, causing no known injuries. The largest known meteor strike in recent times was the Tunguska event, which hit Russia in 1908. And even that strike, which was far bigger than the one that happened over Russia today, didn't injure anyone. Scientists believe that even larger meteorite strikes may have been responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. According to that theory, the impact would have thrown up vast amounts of dust and blanketed the sky for decades and altered the climate on Earth. Basically, that's the meteorite theory that supposedly caused the equivalent of a nuclear winter. And those of you who are into the UFO files and conspiracy theories, the Tunguski event has been associated with everything from alien spacecraft to early nuclear testing and a plethora of other events. But most people are in agreement that it seems to have been a meteorite strike. What would happen if a meteorite hit a major city? Bottom line is, hopefully we never find out. As we saw from the amount of energy that was released from these small strikes, if a major event was to take place, there would be widespread devastation. The shock waves that would blow out windows could possibly create buckling in many types of infrastructures. It would be devastating. Enough of the Science Corner today. Let's move on to the things we love, which is talking about why people on the left want to take our guns. Seems that now in Missouri, there are Democrats that have introduced gun compensation bills. Basically, here's the lowdown. Democrats in Missouri have introduced new anti-gun legislation that would require gun owners to hand over their legally purchased so-called assault weapons to the appropriate law enforcement agency for destruction within 90 days. Under the proposed bill, any person who, prior to the effective date of this law, was legally in possession of an assault weapon, so-called, or a large capacity magazine, shall have 90 days from such effective date to do any of the following without being subject to prosecution. Number 1. Remove the assault weapon, so-called, or large capacity magazine from the state of Missouri. Number 2. Render the assault weapon permanently inoperable. Or, number 3, surrender the assault weapon or large capacity magazine to the appropriate law enforcement agency for destruction, subject to the specific agency's regulations. Unlawful manufacture, import, possession, purchase, sale, or transfer of a so-called assault weapon or a large capacity magazine is a Class C felony. So, boys and girls, basically, this law would turn any law-abiding gun owner today into a felon 90 days from today. State Representatives Rory Ellinger and Jill Screw-Up, I believe that's the proper pronunciation. If I missed that one, apologies. Both Democrats, of course, reportedly introduced the anti-gun legislation, also known as House Bill 545, this week. The gun compensation is being talked about more and more by lawmakers as a means to get so-called assault weapons, which are really semi-automatic rifles, off the streets. Democrats in California last week also proposed legislation that called for the compensation of the state's 166,000 legally purchased semi-automatic rifles. California Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg, Democrat from Sacramento, defended the massive gun control package, saying, quote, "We can save lives." They keep telling us, ladies and gentlemen, they don't want to take the guns. But then they turn around and keep trying to write laws that, in fact, will take the guns. Hopefully, common sense will prevail in these cases. While Democrats at the state level in multiple states are trying to take guns away from law-abiding citizens, the Obama administration's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission says that it should be a federal crime to refuse to hire ex-convicts. In fact, now they're threatening to sue businesses that don't employ criminals. That's right. Back in April of last year, the EEOC unveiled its enforcement guidance on the consideration of arrest and conviction records, which declares that criminal records exclusions have a disparate impact based on race and national origin. Basically, in this guidance, it says that black men are nearly 7 times more likely than white men to serve time in prison, and therefore refusals to hire convicts disproportionately impact blacks. And according to the Wall Street Journal's opinion piece by James Brevard, a libertarian author and lecturer whose books include Freedom in Chains, The Rise of the State, and The Demise of the Citizen, most businesses perform background checks on potential employees, but the EEOC frowns on these checks and creates legal tripwires that could spark federal lawsuits. Well, those specifics in his article are certainly interesting, but we'll continue with what the EEOC says. As one of their commissioners who opposed the new policy, Constance Baker, said in April that the new guidelines will scare businesses from conducting background checks. Reason: if a check does disclose a criminal offense, the EEOC expects a firm to do an individual assessment. That will have to prove that the company has a business necessity not to hire the ex-convict. If the firm does not do the intricate assessment, it could be found guilty of race discrimination. What a surprise. And if it hires a law-abiding applicant over the convict, that puts them at even greater risk. Bavard, back in his article, points out that the biggest bombshell in the new guidelines is that businesses complying with state or local laws requiring background checks can still be sued by the EEOC. Basically, once again, federal government power grab, ignore the state and local bodies and their abilities and responsibility to pass laws and ordinances. Federal law is going to trump. In several instances, federal law does trump state and local laws, but not in all of them, and no one should ever assume an automatic trump. At any rate, all of this came to light when the EEOC took action against G4S Secure Solutions, which provides guards for nuclear power plants and other sensitive sites. What did they do? They refused to hire a twice-convicted thief as a security guard, even though Pennsylvania state law forbids hiring people with felony convictions as security officers. Not to mention the fact that common sense should apply there, too. Todd McCracken of the National Small Business Association is quoted as saying that state and federal courts will allow potentially devastating tort lawsuits against businesses that hire felons who commit crimes at the workplace or in customers' homes. Yet, the EEOC is threatening to launch lawsuits if they do not hire those same felons. Bavard, in his article, concluded that Americans can treat ex-offenders humanely without giving them legal advantages over similar individuals without criminal records. I tend to agree with that. It is absolutely and utterly ridiculous to think that we now live in a world where the federal government is actually trying to pit you against yourself in an attempt to make the right decision. What's your choice? How about this, Washington? How about you'll let small business owners or big business owners or corporate businesses hire who they want based on the criteria of, do you have the qualifications for this position? Can you do the job as we need you to do it? Can you do it without having to have special permissions, without having to have special concessions made, and without having to hire additional